Hello again, everyone. Deflect here, Firm but Fair Gaming. We are on our last iteration. This is the healers in our little chain here of easiest specs to play. Um, I went through the tanks, melee, and range DPS, so this is the last one, and we're gonna jump right into it to see how it goes. Um, the healers are gonna be tough, because this is gonna come down to basically the amount of play you do in each one. And then the more you play it, the easier it gets. So I'm going to try and make this non biased, but they all kind of require some special thing. As for Resto Druid is kind of a weird spot. Resto Druid is kind of mid because you do have to pre-plan a lot with a lot of your hots to make sure you have everything rolling before the big damage comes out. It's a lot like Disc Priest that way. It's not a reactive healer, it's a very proactive healer. And then when the big damage comes out, you want to have everything rolling and then be hitting stuff with like regrowths, and that's when you use your cooldowns and all that fun stuff. And then trying to cat weave in between. They're bringing back owl weaving, which is great. I prefer to owl weave for the sole fact. If I'm a range healer, I would like to be able to play a range DPS accompanied with that. I don't want to be a range healer and then a melee DPS when you're cat weaving. It just didn't make sense to me. I know you did a lot more damage that way, but it always made more sense to owl weave than cat weave, in my opinion. So I'm gonna put it in mid for now. It's a tough one to start off the pack with, and I don't know. It's kind of tough because it's the one where you have a lot of hots you got to control. So once you get those rolling, though, the gameplay itself, hots and regrowths, and Trank is no good anymore, not as good anymore, but that's neither here nor there. We're gonna leave it in mid. Holy Paladin. Holy Paladin. Where do I put Holy Paladin? You beacon. It's a melee healer, which automatically makes it a little harder, but you know what? It's not overloaded. Like you do have some holy shocks and building up your holy power. I don't I think where a good spot for Holy Paladin would go. You, uh, I'm, oof. Where would I put this? Probably easier than Resto Druid. Mid's kind of a good spot for it, I guess. Either mid or not bad, I would say, because you can beacon two people, and then I know that's probably changing. I think in the next one, I don't know if Beacon's quite. I think they're nerfed Beacon. I have to go back through the information, but anyway, a lot of holy shocks coming up. But it is a melee healer, so it kind of we're gonna put it here. That's hard to decide. There we go. Holy Priest. Holy Priest is not that hard of a spec. You don't have that much utility. You're a lot reactive. Sometimes you're waiting for procs, but it's not an overly hard spec to play by any means. It's a very reactive healer. Damage goes out, you heal damage. Pretty much sums it up. I know in I think it was Raid that Apotheosis you get up for a long time, or maybe it was Mythic Plus. I didn't play a ton of Holy Priest this season, but I know it wasn't. I played a bunch last season. It's not an overly complex healer by any means, and it is nice to have a healing button for all the stuff you need to do. Oh look, I need a flash heal. Oh, I need a regular heal. Renew on someone, get a little hot rolling. Like it's a pretty straightforward healer. It's one of the easier ones to get into. You don't have a lot of damage buttons to worry about. And then yeah, we're gonna put that in easy to start. We're gonna leave this one to the end because I'm still gonna muddle where to put that. I play a lot of Mistweaver Monk. Mistweaver Monk has been my main in raid for I don't know a couple seasons now, 3 seasons. And because it's just Mythic Plus, I have to really think about where to put this. Resto Shaman though. Resto Shaman is you have some amazing utility, and the Shaman utility it does require a bit, but Shaman itself isn't a hard spec either for Resto. There are little nuances like it is to everything. I'm just trying to think if it's easier or harder than Holy Priest. A lot more utility to worry about as Resto Shaman. but it's not an overly complex spec either. I would say if you're worried about damage as well, I would say Holy Priest is harder to do a lot more damage with. And sometimes waiting for procs, if you're running one of the proc ones, it's a little tougher. We're going to go Resto Shaman easier than Holy Priest. Chain Heal, you can get away with doing a lot of things not very well on Shamans until you get to some higher levels. You could sit there and chain heal people, just Riptide, chain heal, healing rain. Like you could get away with playing it pretty simplistic, but you could also get away with playing Holy Priest pretty simplistic too. So anyway, they're kind of tied. You could swap them either way, whatever way you guys want. They could swap either way for the easiest specs. Preservation Evoker. This one is tough. This one is very tough to put in. I'm going to put it in harder because of your range limitation, because of your directional limitation, and because of your different windows you can store. So there's a lot you can do with it, and a lot of setup, and a lot of different things Prez does well. The range limitation is rough. The fact that if you're playing with a bunch of range and you have to echo a bunch of people, and then your breath goes forward, like it's directionally and range limited. So that requires a lot of setup on its own. It's almost worse off than a melee healer because melee's a lot of their abilities you can just cast on people, where this one it just doesn't work that way. And a lot of different things you can store up and then send out with your burst. Yeah, it's definitely a harder one to master, that is for sure. This priest. This priest is another tough one to put in. Because this priest requires more, like it's one of the ones that requires more knowledge of the dungeon than I would say more knowledge of your class, if that makes sense. It's a ramp built healer in Mythic Plus. And knowing the dungeon is better than, I guess, overly knowing the class. But once you do that, like your windows are pretty good. It just sucks you really don't want to move during them. When you have your orb out and your squid and all that stuff, it's a pretty straightforward class then. So they made it a lot easier, baking in Schism. But the null again, most of these require you to know the dungeon, and that's where it comes tough. I'm gonna put it in harder, just for the. It really requires a lot more dungeon knowledge and ramping. So if you miss your ramp, it's very punishing. Whereas others, if you miss your ramp, you can kind of still get away with healing people throughout it, where Disc Priest is kind of a lot more punishing if you miss it. And the setup to it, like you do require, a few buttons to set it up. It could have went either way, but yeah, we're gonna put it in harder. Now the last one. The last one is very tough for me to decide where it goes. You are a melee healer, so you have to watch out for that. And if anyone says casting Mistweaver it's playable, yes, it is playable. It's more of a raid thing than a Mythic Plus thing, and this is a Mythic Plus tier list. And in Mythic Plus, caster will always be worse than Fistweaver as it currently sits. Can you get away with it? Yes, you can get away with everything. But as it currently sits, caster is not as good as fist weaving. Fist weaving is better. You need some knowledge of the dungeon to know when damage is coming out, especially if it's going to be AoE damage or single target damage, because that changes, because you can't get a lot of benefit until 11.1 from single target Jade empowered lightnings. But on the other hand, you really just try and keep up with your renewing mist and resetting it with rising sun kicks. That takes a little pressure off. Plus you can I run a different one, peer to peer, where it will follow your soothing mist will follow you, so you don't have to recast it. I did give up something one talent for that, but I find it worth it, because there's a lot of times where people stand and stuff and you just need to channel onto them. So I don't know if people are gonna agree or not agree with this. And you know what? It's my tier list, so haha. Either way. I think it's gonna be a little tougher than Disc. And I think because you are melee and the range limitation of Prez and the directional limitation makes it slightly harder. I think it's going to go here because they did give you a lot of buttons that you can get out of trouble. Like Shaylin's is a huge button, and now you can have it on a 40-second max. So you get 10 stacks in 40 seconds, which is insane. That's a good one. Your Chi window makes it a little tougher because your Chi you want to hit specifically. You want to be in melee to do it. Can you get away with it not being in melee? You could. Is it as good? No, but it could be done. Yeah, I'm gonna put it in harder, and that's gonna be where we're kind of sitting for healers. I know it's kind of grouped up for healers, but they're kind of sectioned off a bit, so you can kind of step from one to the other, basically level. So we're gonna go with harder. I don't think it's as hard as Prez, but you could also do that. If anyone jumped to the end of the video, we might just do that for some spacing. And this is going to probably be where they sit, so it kind of jumps in a little bit of levels each one you go up. And that is going to be the tier list that we've made from easiest to hardest. We've now completed them all. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments. I'm sure people are going to tell me I got it all wrong, but hey, that's the joys of this. Everyone can have their own opinion. Let me know what you would change. Deflect, Firm Fair Gaming. We'll see you in the next one.